We're good on time. Okay. Tom Tiffany he's from Milwaukee. He was the driving force behind the iron mine legislation. He lives in Tim Sullivan. He lives in his district. He's basically his puppet. And he led the mining company, write the bill. This is from, I believe this is from Fox Business News. So she's having a discussion with Tom Tiffany about the iron mine legislation. And she's about to ask him a question based on environmental fact. Now, what do we know about facts?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Listen to his response. And I haven't had time to talk about metaphor, right? But metaphor is incredibly powerful. Almost everything you understand about the world is an embodied metaphor in your brain, right? Perfect example. Glass of water. Take a drink, what happens? The level goes what? If I fill it up, the level goes up. What's better? Down or up? Metaphor, right? You learn that from when you're very young, right? So if I say that so-and-so is a warm person, that's a compliment, right? If I say they're a cold person, it's bad. Why is that? Because when you were nurtured as a child, you felt the warmth of your mother, your father. That's a good feeling. Warmth. Okay? If somebody's cold, it's the antithesis of that, right? So metaphor is everywhere. Tom Tiffany creates a metaphor for the mining bill that you're going to hear him say, and we'll discuss why that's so powerful and how it affects his conservative frame.
And speaking of getting those permits, not surprisingly, environmentalists are not excited about this. They claim that over 900 million tons of waste and tailings will be dumped in the wetlands and streams of the Bad River watershed that produce the same acid mine drainage that has resulted in fish advisories for mercury and wild rice dead zone for 100 miles downstream in Minnesota. That's a claim that they put everywhere. I'm sure that you've already responded to it. What do you say?
Yeah, I term this a 21st century iron ore mining bill. What it reflects is our current environmental standards, which are very high in the state of Wisconsin, and they're contained in this.
Okay. Did he even address the facts?
No.
So. What did he say?
21st
This is a
21st century.
21st century mining bill. When he says that, what does that imply? Movement? In which direction? Forward. He created a metaphor for the mining bill that moves policy forward. Brilliant. Yes. But very powerful. Alliteration, metaphor, imagery, right? When I was looking for clips, I heard that, wow. Conservatives, now whether he came up with that or somebody fed it to him, whoever did it was brilliant. Because from that moment on, he had framed the issue. And here's what the person who frames the issue first, because of mutual inhibition, sets the frame. That's why we have to do this over and over and over again until we get to the point where we start framing issues first. So what would you say? What would progressives say about, the environment in general, or specifically the mining bill? Why is that such an important issue to progressives? What is it?
That it would be because all of us enjoy pristine parts of the copper area in Mellon, Wisconsin. I was raised 18 miles north of where they're going to want to put that mine, and I went to that hearing, and I gave them a piece of my mind.
Conservatives are very biconceptual on this issue, but they don't talk about it in terms of the environment. They talk about the land, the water, right? Fishing, hunting, camping, hiking, whatever, right? It's a freedom issue. And it can also be, you can also create forward motion by talking about future generations and children. Are your children going to have the freedom to enjoy the land, water, air like you did?
No.
Or your parents or your grandparents? The other thing is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Could you have asked him, okay, we're talking about the 21st century, what improvements are we going to do to make sure that we have a good life?
No, because then you're giving him the opportunity to reinforce that metaphor.
But aren't you forcing him to say, okay, if you're moving forward and improving, what are you improving? I mean, I'm just...
I understand what you, yeah, but see, that's somewhat negation because you're still reinforcing the idea, even though you're trying to get him
right.
to counter with facts or to
Yes.
apply facts to it, you're still, that would be the same as me saying, well, Senator Tiffany, that's not a 21st century mining bill because,
Okay.
see, I'm still reinforcing
You're
it.
still in the frame that he set.
Yeah,
And you have to go to some more value-based thing.
you have to go to a progressive.
Right.
You know, you have to go in terms of progressive values. The easiest thing is, to go into this idea of freedom to enjoy land, water, air, the idea of destruction of communities. In sand mining country, they talk about the destruction of property values, destruction of community, right? That kind of thing is very powerful. For personal health.
Right.
Yep.
The people who live by the Muscogee Iron Range in Minnesota have all kinds of freedom to enjoy that bare, parched land that isn't good for anything. At one time was the rice beds of the Native Americans, and it's nothing but a dead zone now. But they've got all kinds of freedom to enjoy it.
And sarcasm works too, right? And satire. No, look at Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert. Look what they did. Satire and sarcasm are very powerful, but you've got to be the right person to do it. I couldn't do that because.
Well, how would the argument play out if you were to use the business model and say profit now, pay later?
Ooh, yeah. See, that's
Is that a positive way of doing it or negative?
that. I've yet to find an effective use of that. Just because when you start talking about profit, you're implying that the people that make the profit are moral. See, that's the idea that there are companies profiting from that mining operation, sand mining, whatever, right? The conservative frame, they're saying that they deserve that profit. They deserve, and see, the other thing is they think of them in terms of natural resources. Right? What are resources for? They're to be used.
Yeah.
That's why conservatives will always use the term natural resources. They've co-opted it. And that's something that's really hard to get that back because resources in all sorts of other metaphorical language, resources are to be used. That's why, talk to conservatives who are biconceptual on nature and the environment, talk to them about land, water, and air. They get that. That's where you can have the conversation with them, is about the land, about the water, about the air. Yeah.
Hunting and fishing.
Hunting and fishing, right? Don't you want to have the freedom to hunt on clean land? I mean, if our land and water are polluted, you're not going to be able to eat the venison. Your kids won't be able to enjoy that's, yeah.
But,
Let me just go back because.
The freedom issue on this one really resonates with me because they took the freedom of all that land away supposedly they are getting a tax break for having that land free to the public to use, and they just took that away. And I don't know why that doesn't get more discussion.
Because this whole debate is about jobs.
Yeah.
Right, see, that's the problem with the conservative frame being so dominant. This debate is all about jobs. It's not about freedom. It's not, if it were about freedom, you'd have a lot of different outcome in some conservative areas where there's, Kathleen Whitehouse, she has to be biconceptual on guns. Right? She has to be a progressive person who, has a progressive view of gun ownership that resonates with biconceptual conservatives, right? And what it is what she'll say is, hopefully, we talked about this, is that you have the freedom to enjoy your gun because the public regulates it so that responsible people can enjoy those freedoms. Because you don't want those guns in the wrong hands. And if we didn't have the public to do that, that would impinge on your freedom, right? So because of what the public does, you have the freedom to enjoy your gun for hunting, but not for. Yep.
Earlier you were talking about the fact that Tom just avoided the question altogether and started talking in his frame. And what did you call it? Was it frame inhibition?
Pivoting, or well, okay. So the mutual inhibition happens when you evoke the progressive frame. It inhibits the activation of the conservative frame. That's mutual inhibition. What Tiffany did, she expressed facts, and he just, evoked the conservative frame, which was this metaphor for, we're moving the state forward with this bill. It's really brilliant. I mean, it was.
The thing with that mine is that up there it's a poverty area, and all they gotta say is maybe jobs. They don't say how many jobs. They say maybe jobs, and everybody's ears perk up. Oh yeah, we need those jobs. But yet when they hired the security outfit up there, they hired a company out of Arizona.
Right, but here's the problem. Right, is that I know a lot of people who spent weeks up there protesting, right? And a lot of them tried to counter the jobs argument with, well, this isn't going to create any jobs in the state of Wisconsin. This is going to be out-of-state jobs, right? That should have been the counter argument. Because it doesn't reinforce the jobs frame. It creates a new frame about freedom to enjoy our natural heritage and our land, and to have that for our children and for their children. So what are you doing? You're forcing people to make a moral judgment. And by doing that, you start to change public discourse, because then there will be people that will think about the issue differently, right? And you see, you all believe in that freedom to enjoy land, water, air. You get it, right? But it's so deeply embedded in you, you have to consciously access it, because you're so used to hearing about jobs. So, I had a couple. Do not say resources. Resources are to be used. Talk about the land. Also, create the idea of community, right? Our water, our air, right? There was this great bill in the U.S. Senate on carbon emissions that never saw the light of day, right? There was this idea of who owns the air. Who owns it? We all, right? All of us do. We are all vested in the quality of the air, right? So there was I don't remember who it was, made a proposal that you tax emissions over a certain level. And every year, every taxpayer would get a rebate on carbon emissions because we own the air.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Wouldn't that have been brilliant? But it never saw the light of day, right? Because there was this whole idea of cap and trade, which that was a messaging disaster too. This also applies, right? Private prosperity for everyone depends on the public, and that means land, water, and air. How can you have a prosperous community if you have dirty air and dirty water? You can't. So make it about community. And this goes back to the freedom issue. If you don't have clean water to drink, clean air to breathe, and land to live on, are you free?
No.
I mean, people up in western Wisconsin have been saying this, that the mining laws are anti-freedom. Why? Because they're stealing our land, water, and pollute our air to line their pockets. Here's another phrase that you guys can start using, is this idea of privateers. Right? What's a privateer? It's a corporate profiteer who get rich with public assets. Right? They're polluters and privateers of our land, our water, our air, the community.